Hello, folks, and welcome again to Soaring Prophets. Kind of another one of our episodes here focused on the Healthcare Amplified Summit that we're heading down to Orlando, Florida, the 25th to the 29th. We have a fantastic guest, and this is someone who we've been showcasing a little bit, excited to have on. Todd Eury and the Pharmacy Podcast Network has really done something unique in the space. And you know, pharmacy, you go, you get your medication over the counter. You might not have, necessarily a relationship with your pharmacist, but how do you build education? How do you build awareness as a business, as a pharmacist? And that's what Todd and his team is totally driven home for that whole industry. And we're thrilled to have him. We're going to be so excited to get him down to PodFest in Orlando. I want to bring Todd up here. Todd, let's bring you full screen. Sir, look how handsome you look. Look at that setup.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you. Setup envy in such a big way. I love it. It's fantastic. But Todd, maybe you can tell us a little bit. I know that you got the Podfather. You've been doing this a few years now. Why did you get into podcasting? And from your background that wasn't podcasting, why did you get into it? And why is it such an important space for what you've pivoted into now, into the pharmacological sector?
Excellent. Well, I want to just say thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm usually the one doing the interviewing. It's very strange to be the interviewee. But podcasting was brand new to me in March of 2009. So this March will be our 15th year. And I was an avid blogger. I loved blogging. When I got into pharmacy in 2004, it was in technology. It was for long-term care technology. Long-term care is a much different environment. It's the sector of pharmacy that takes care of our grandparents and our parents, and it's very specialized. So I was helping to design workflow systems. I was selling pharmacy management systems to long-term care pharmacies throughout the country. At that time, there were only about 800 privately owned long-term care pharmacies throughout the country. Now there's around 1,600. And I was a blogger. So I blogged from 2004 to 2009. And in 2009, I started traveling a whole bunch and it was all over the place. So I just didn't have time to blog anymore. So I started a podcast because I talked to one of my friends and he said, I listened to podcasts. I had no idea what he's talking about. He sent me a couple. You had to download it. Then you had to play it on your computer. It was a file. It was real, clunky. Yeah. And my first podcast platform was called Blog Talk Radio, which was horrible. You call into an 800 number and you have your guest call into an 800 number and it does a recording for you. And it sounded like just a tin can. But anyway, so got into that and realized that our market, our profession had 0 podcasts. So mine was the very first podcast that was really about the professional, the B2B, the pharmacist talking to the pharmacist or the technologist talking to the pharmacist. And it went nowhere. I had very few listeners over the next 3 to 5 years because nobody understood what podcasting was. But then something happened right around 2013, 14, where people started requesting information and they wanted my downloads and they were connecting. And that's when the network took off because the pharmacy podcast was a one-man band. It was me. And right around that time, we started attracting other people that had information and knowledge and things, because I am not a clinician. I am not a pharmacist. So I don't understand, as you said, Patrick, you were talking about education, which is so important. And I wasn't able to really dive into the weeds of a specific disease state. If you said the word hyperlipidemia to me, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that's a blood disease or anything like that. So I started attracting pharmacists. I started attracting specialists. And that's when we really started to build this network, which is very unique. Today, we reach over 100,000 listeners per month. We're global known. We just had our Pharmacy 50 Most Influential Awards ceremony that brought in thousands of people. Fiona Serrata from Italy flew in to accept her award in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was an honor for us, just to show you how big this is becoming. And now I'm speaking at Healthcare Amplified, which is just an honor. And as I confess to the both of you, I have been to hundreds of conferences over my span of being in pharmacy and being even in telecommunications. I have never been to a podcast conference. So this is very special to me that PodFest will be my first conference outside of healthcare, and I am looking forward to it. So I cannot wait to meet the both of you.
Well, I appreciate
that's amazing. I think that's incredible. It's our first as well. We haven't done any podcast conferences. We're looking very forward to the networking aspect and all of that. You brought some interesting stuff up. Like, so pharmacy is super important to everybody. It's important to like the layman like us who don't know anything about drugs and stuff like that. Why did you choose to go B2B? Why did you choose to do, like, I would think that everyone else, that you would have a larger audience if you like did for us, where you're doing shows for pharmacists, which is a smaller audience. Why was that important? And why did you choose that audience as a smaller audience?
Well, James, if I went after the public, which is, I'm doing this in reverse. I started with B2B. If I would have started back then and went to taking pharmacy messaging to the public, I'd probably be a millionaire now. And I did it back. I did it, but I think I did it the right way, because now that we're going to be moving for 2024, one of the major initiatives, we've been testing these markets. We're going to start taking specific messaging to the public, and we're going to go the opposite direction, where we're going to start building. We're going to always leave our pharmacy podcast network, but we're going to start taking some of our podcasters to the public and start challenging big organizations. Like, for example, Sex with Emily, which is an amazing podcast. She's probably top 100 podcast for the last 5 years. She's an amazing a clinician. She talks about sex in detail. We are going to challenge her with a clinician who understands how do medications impact women's health? How do medications impact a sexual health and relationships? And so that's going to give up. But I feel like I've soaked in the clinical and the structural of what a provider does for us and what pharmacy does. 9 out of 10 people that are considered a patient are touching something to do with medications or drugs or a therapy of some sort that a pharmacist is involved. So we've done it right, where I have ripened the bucket of content, and I'm going to be able to build content for any facet of pharmacy you can think of and deliver it to the public, and doing it the right way. And when I say doing it the right way, I was the first podcast to deliver what I've termed, it's my own term, I should probably copyright this, and that's evidence-based podcasting. So evidence-based podcasting means that you can listen to something that is just as good as reading a medical journal that has been peer-reviewed.
That is such an interesting way to do that. And again, taking that information, turning it into entertainment. It's hard to go through the journals, and especially where we are in society right now, we're instant gratification in our information. True. And if you're able to put this on, you're jogging on the treadmill in the morning, getting your workout in. It seems like, Todd, you've really created a space that not only, the pharmacists themselves, but their techs, everyone can get in and kind of on board with what you folks are doing. And the scope of what you folks have talked about on your podcast is huge. And I talked a little bit briefly kind of before we got started here today, because there's some hot button issues in the pharmacy world. We talk about the opioid epidemic. We talked a little bit about your background in that and how that's kind of rolled forward, as well as efficacy and, vaccine hesitancy, a lot of these things that have come up over the last little while. And a lot of those things are informational and educational gappings, where I see what you're doing as an opportunity for individuals to have dialogue, understand what's happening within that industry in a way that it's not CNN. It's not this mainstream messaging. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the organizations that you're working with. You're dealing with deans of pharmacy schools. Like, these are not low-end individuals that are coming in and hoping to sell, erection medications. Right? We're talking about like the mucky muck of the audience. Now we can focus their messaging and their branding in a way to hit home to the consumer as that infotainment. Because like you say, pharmacology is touching all of our lives and more of late.
It's true. It's true. So organizations that we've worked with, just as references, we've worked with pharmaceutical manufacturers. We've worked with technologists. We've worked with schools of pharmacy, as you've said. a shout out to WVU School of Pharmacy that's really close to our studios. We're south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have 3 schools of pharmacy that we've worked with. Actually, we've had 12 schools of pharmacy that we've worked with, but the close ones are the Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy, University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy, Duquesne University School of Pharmacy, and of course, WVU, as I mentioned. We're working with public relation organizations that want their client message to be directly pushed to a pharmacist specifically. Right. And if you said to a publicist, if you said to a public relations company, you asked them, we need a podcast to purposely be marketed to clinicians and pharmacists, and that's it. We don't want it necessarily marketed to the public. How can we do that? We're literally the only game in town that's going to be able to deliver that to you.
And it's taken you, like you were saying, Todd, it's taken you that 15 years of hard fought in the trenches, building those relationships that now is worth its weight in gold in this time of, again, speculation and potential hesitancy around that awareness aspect. I love what you're doing. And I think it absolutely goes to what we're talking about kind of on a broader perspective in regards to the Healthcare Amplified Summit, because you folks in what you are doing is exactly where Healthcare Amplified is trying to push. Yep. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why you're attending Healthcare Amplified and what you folks believe you're going to garner from your attendance.
So John Largent flew into Pittsburgh to meet me, and he introduced me to Healthcare Amplified. John has been a podcaster, content creator in the long-term care space, not pharmacy, just strictly long-term care. He's done a lot of consulting for big organizations like Brookdale, which is one of the largest long-term care facilities in the country. They have organizations and long-term care facilities throughout the entire country. And when he told me, he called me, we got on LinkedIn, and then he finally flew in and I got to spend some time with him. He said, you have to come to Healthcare Amplified because we're going to start, just as my vision is, on the island of pharmacy. Healthcare Amplified is now coming out to the entire healthcare industry, a global reach to the entire healthcare industry that says we have to come together as content creators. We have to share each other's best practices, and we have to rise above the consumer podcasts. Meaning, when you listen to our podcast, as you've pointed out, Patrick, you said it's a higher quality. It absolutely is. My audience are some of the most intelligent, most educated people. Make me feel like when I'm in the room with them, like the dummy in the room where I don't really understand the pharmacological.
I do that for Pat every day. I'm just saying.
I have to produce content that is at a quality scale that we know what we're outlining, we know what we're talking about, and more importantly, we know the referenceable materials of why we're talking about what we're talking about. And like you said, it has to be educational. So being part of Healthcare Amplified is a joy, because now I'm going to be able to take my secret sauce and share it with other healthcare podcasters to, once again, all what they say, rising tides lift all boats. And I want to see Healthcare Amplified make a major impact on content development for the healthcare profession. And you know what that does? That ends up spilling out into better patient care.
I feel like you've been talking to Sia. Sia says that all the time. All boats rise with the tide.
Right.
Very, very wonderful woman. We love her. So we're excited about Healthcare Amplified in the sense that we want to learn how to grow our business. We want to learn how to get with collaborations. I think it's just such an exciting opportunity to meet other podcasters that are in the same space, learn from them, learn from yourself, like your setup, like you're talking about. Now, what I'd like to know is that you were saying just under 50 podcasters on the podcasting network, on your pharmacy network. How do you, on a network that size, reach a diverse audience and keep them engaged? Because your podcasts are unique and different, but how do you reach them all and keep them engaged? Are you finding that they're engaged on all across the board, or is it specifically shows that are bringing them in? And how do you make sure your audience gets what they need out of that many podcasts?
That's a great question, James, and really it's ebb and flow. We'll have sometimes, like last year, 2023, one of the biggest bumps that we received in listens and downloads was from Pharmacy Crossroads, which is a podcast directed to community pharmacy owners. That is, our private community pharmacy owners. There's about 19,000 privately owned pharmacies in the United States. And that podcast is specific to them. And of course, it took a major rise in 2023. Whereas a podcast that's been out in helping pharmacists become residents, go into residency or something, that would go up and down depending on the season. The season of residency is usually right around December, January, February. And it takes that, sometimes it gets massive listens during that fall and winter period, and then it falls off. So it's a mixture of what podcasts are buzzing and which ones aren't. We have a policy podcast called the PBM Reform Podcast. It's about the insurance side of our world. For the layperson, it would probably bore you. But if you're in the industry, you want to understand what the heck is going on with PBMs taking up all this money and all this profit, and we don't have enough resources to keep pharmacies open. Right. You see pharmacies closing across the nation, CVS, Walgreens closing stores. It's because our payment system is baroque. I mean, it is wrecked. And so that podcast is all about interviewing senators and congresspeople and other clinicians and doctors. And we come together and we use the PBM Reform Podcast as a way of understanding what's going on. And then we have Maternal RX, which is about getting pregnant and pregnancy health, and then post-pregnancy, and the Sex PharmD, which is about sexual health, and the Long-Term Care Pharmacy Podcast, which is fun for me because that's where I started. So there's such a mixture of podcasts on purpose, because I pay attention what happens on LinkedIn. I pay attention to what is being talked about on social media, and I also pay immense amount of attention of what's happening in the news. And then I make sure that my podcasts are really parlay and paralleling that, because in my book that I'm writing someday and release possibly in 2025, if I can keep on it, you should never podcasting should be secondary to a primary source of information. So you heard it here first. Yes. You hear it here on Soaring Prophets. If you're a podcaster, do not make your podcast primary. Make it secondary to something that you can attach to, a white paper, a news article, someone's speech, or a TED Talk or something, and use the podcast to amplify that piece of content.
Well, Todd, I think it's such an interesting space. And again, diving into some of your content, because we do our homework around here. Like you are literally talking about legislation. Like you folks are really making waves in regards to the pharmacy industry. And that brings up certain liability. Maybe you can talk a little bit. And the reason why I bring this up is because, so myself, I do a broadcast on our Soaring Prophets media of financial fitness. And I do a lot of the media, I do a lot of the finance heavy stuff in regards to technical analysis, looking and talking with high level individuals in the finance space. And the number one issue when we bring people on there is I have to be very cautious. I have to be very concerned about the information I'm putting out into the industry, out into the public. What sort of liability do you folks have to be concerned about? And is there legislation around information and the dissemination of that information for your audience?
So when we deal with our pharma companies, pharma was the first one we did was a Trulicity, which was a diabetes medication that Eli Lilly came out with. And in 2018, I convinced them, after 6 months of trying to convince them, to do a podcast series, and they did it. And it was the most tedious podcast I ever did in my life. It was a 6-part series that turned into an 8-part series, and now it's a 5-part series because, as you said, things changed and they had to legally take down content that was no longer relevant. It was expired. So that comes into play in our portfolio when we're working with pharma companies, when we're working with Pfizer, when we're working with Moderna. We have to be extremely careful about what content we put out, because it is geared towards the pharmacist and the physician, primarily the pharmacist. But guess what? Anybody can listen to our podcast. Yeah, so when we put content out there, we have to make sure that the legal side and compliancy has double sniffed, triple sniffed, and listened to it and made corrections and then put it out and then marketed it. We're working with an organization now through Novo Nordisk, and Novo has said, listen, we want our content out on all of your streams. We do not want it out on other platforms, maybe like a YouTube. We don't want it out on Twitter or something. Yeah. They have their reasoning. That's not me to question them. They're my client. I'm going to do whatever that they want me to do from a content publishing perspective. And you have to be sensitive to that. You have to be able to read that. You have to be responsible. And that's what this is. This is a publication that is extremely keen and aware of what's happening in the pharmaceutical space, pharmacy care space. And then, of course, we publish and podcast depending on the variance of severity in the seriousness. Some of our podcasts are extremely casual. Some of them are guess who published with us? So somebody published with us over the summer. I still can't believe that they're on our network. The FDA is part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Wow. I love that, though.
Congrats, man.
And the reason why they are is they trust
100%
that the Pharmacy Podcast Network is the exact audience that they want to get the content to. Yeah. And they designed it for pharmacists. And they know if we push it out through the PPN, we know that pharmacists are going to listen.
That's so amazing. So was there over the last, because as Pat said, there's a lot of hot button topics coming up over the last 4 years. What was the hardest thing for you guys to deal with? Was it during COVID? Was it the opioid? Or was it something else that when it came up, you guys had to go, okay, we're going to have to really delve into how we were going to frame this information so that it reaches the right audience, but also reaches them in a right way? What was the most difficult thing that you guys had to deal with, and how did you end up dealing with it?
There's been a lot of those, James. I think if I had to put one first, it's transforming a nation. So if you Google Transforming a Nation Pharmacy Podcast, you'll find the Transforming a Nation series. And we would pick extremely sensitive subjects that we dove into. And there were times when I was interviewing people that I was sweating because of how nervous I was because of the content. So I'll give you some examples. The first one we did was on racism in the pharmacy industry, which was something I didn't understand.
Just some light reading.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. A little light reading. Yeah.
Second, I interviewed, that was a 3-part series. I interviewed all women because 62% of our pharmacists are female. We were talking about sexual harassment in pharmacy. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
Sweat.
You're the exact person everyone wants to hear talk about that.
White guy from Philly. Yeah.
So these are issues no one else was talking about.
Yeah.
No one else was allowing these wonderful, intelligent PharmDs, these doctors of pharmacy, to get that out. Those experiences that they had in racism, the experience they had in sexual harassment, the experience they had in Asian hate. We had an Asian hate podcast about what it was like to be Asian and being a pharmacist and what they experienced. That is such an important. One of the topics, transgender medicine, right? There's conservative, there's liberal. Guess what? I don't care. Yeah. I care about how pharmacists impact people's health. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to amplify those voices. My opinion doesn't matter. I have opinions. We all have opinions. Yeah. But I wanted to harness, how does pharmacy feel? How do pharmacists feel about transgender medicine? So Transforming a Nation I'm sweating right now actually thinking about it. But you have, as someone that is a publisher that is truly transparent, as we are, we have to bring all minds to the table in order to share, because things will never change if we don't get them out in the open and talk about them.
I think that's incredible. The topics that you're hitting are just so important right now, especially transgender medicine, like the drugs that are going out and how they affect people, and really knowing how to deal with people who are going through that experience. Was there anything specific? Like, did you have, was it pharmacists that had gone through, that had decided to change transgender, or was it the clients? Was it dealing with clients, or was it the pharmacists?
You're asking the best questions, James. So it was both. We had pharmacists on our network express how they were majorly impacted. One of the Pharmacy 50 most influential pharmacists that out there that won one of the awards, and this is all by their peers. This had nothing to do with us manipulating anything. It was all voting. Ken O'Shea, Dr. Ken O'Shea, He has transgendered. He's gone through that whole process, and he was able to share what that was like. But he was also able to stand up for his patients from a community pharmacy perspective and express how fighting for the rights of different people in different stages of that and the medications that are coming up was part of that. The series that we did through Transforming a Nation was all from the perspective of patients that went through it, that were talking with their pharmacist, that were able to relay the experiences in multiple parts, and how there's so much bias in that that frame of healthcare. So we really had a very diverse mix of content, and we certainly plan on continuing that.
Todd, I love what it is that you folks are doing. I'm super excited to see you down in Orlando at Healthcare Amplified. And this, folks, if you have an opportunity, here's the QR code. You can scan it. You still have time to get your tickets. James and I, like we said, we're going to be by the pool. It's probably going to be cold, but we are Canadians, so it's going to be beautiful in comparison to what we're dealing with right now. But Todd, I want to thank you, first of all, for coming here. You are doing in the podcasting space what so many people are wanting and aspiring to, is that you've carved out this beautiful niche. First of all, you're changing the way that the world looks at certain aspects of an industry, which, I tip my hat to you. That is not an easy thing, but you're doing it in a way that is educational. It's fun. You come across as this guy you could sit down, and we probably will have a scotch, maybe a cigar, absolutely, even if we're feeling that at the end of the night. But this is what podcasting can be. You're shining that light on it. And it's not just a couple guys sitting in the basement talking about the NFL. It can be so much more. Yes. It can really change the world. And the topics you're hitting, they're hard. They need to be talked about. And it looks like what you folks are doing, you're doing in a way that is super professional, super clean. And I'm glad that we have an opportunity to meet you. So, Todd, from me, my sign off, let's make some money together, folks. And you're going to have to check us out at Healthcare Amplified. James, take us out, brother.
Yeah, Todd, you know what? I am so happy you came on. I feel like we should be doing like a 2-hour show with you, because there are so many great topics. I absolutely love that you're touching base on cultural issues, sexuality, because all of those are very important. I have a lot of female friends that are in other professions that talk quite often about how being sexually discriminated against or even sexually targeted is a big thing. I don't know. I don't have a female friend that hasn't had some sort of experience in that area. And that's a terrible thing. And I love that you are standing up and you're letting people know and be more aware of that in the space that you're in. I love that you've rised above, and you're doing a podcast on a level of professionals, and you're showing everybody what podcasts can be. Like Pat said, it's not just two guys in a basement talking about, football or just giving their opinions. You're bringing on the people that are the top of their field, like you said, brilliant. And they're able to express themselves and talk to other people and really get that message out. And I love it. And I am excited to be able to maybe start understanding some of the podcasts you're doing, because you're going to bring it to people like me. So I will get to experience that and understand it more. And I love that. I think what you're doing, Todd, is amazing. I look forward to learning from you when I come down to Healthcare Amplified. I understand you're going to be speaking, as a lot of other people are speaking, like Sabrina and Zach and Darlene. A lot of great people, Raquel. And I am super excited. Please do scan that code. Please come down. See us in Orlando. If you come down, like I said, come say, hey, I watch your show. I love you. Come see Todd. Go, I watch your show. I love you. And you know what? If you come see us and you tell us that we love you, we'll sign whatever you want, and we'll do a little interview with you and get you on the show, because you know what? Profiteers out there, you're the reason we're doing this. We want to hear your voice. We want to know, who do you want to hear from? Who do you want us to interview? Who do you want us to talk to? What are the stories you want to learn? And Todd, from the bottom of my heart, I love what you're doing, and I really can't wait now to get to Healthcare Amplified and learn. I just want to play with your gadgets, man. Like I'm telling you, your setup, blown my mind. I just love it. Profiteers out there, let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together. Todd, you're up. This is walk us out here with your best and brightest message to our profiteers.
Thank you. Please keep in mind that all podcasters, you professional podcasters, please keep in mind, podcasting is not about you. It's about the audience that you're rising up. It's about the audience that you are supporting and you are getting to. Ultimately, the audience that I serve is the people out there who are taking those medications. If you want inside information on the pharmaceutical market, listen to our podcast, because it's people. You could be a fly on the wall and you listen to two clinicians talk between each other about something that the public might not know, and you'll get the insider information on it. Soaring Prophets is amazing. You're bringing so many people to the table. You're amplifying my message, which is so important to me. I don't do enough marketing of myself. I'm always marketing my client's message and not necessarily our own. So I want to thank you, Patrick and James, for doing this, for inviting me on your show. I cannot wait to meet you and get some pictures and video with you to share on social media. I want to give a shout out to all the nurses out there. I'm married to a nurse, so I love nurses. I'm married to the sexiest nurse on planet Earth. And I'll tell you what, pharmacists are my favorite providers. They're brilliant. They're always behind the scenes. They don't get enough recognition. And it's my job to amplify their voices. So guess what? They can protect the patient.
Oh, I love everything you just said, Todd.